When we did Exorcism of Emily Rose, we padded the walls of the office because people had to be possessed by the devil, speaking in tongues, eating bugs off the floor, having epileptic seizures. Like the people that were in just even a smidge holding back, like I think you said, Rich, you can always dial it down, but like there is an opportunity, if ever, to go for it. And I think it's hard because actors don't always have the benefit of knowing, well, how big is too big? You can't always know, but you can always say afterwards, do you want me to do it differently? Do you have an adjustment? I will happily adjust, turn it, dial it up, dial it down. But still, this is a world where you just have to go for it. It's not a subtle place to live in. You got to go for it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's The Business Program. I'm Perri Nemiroff, Senior Producer at Collider. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our casting directors today. First up, we have Nancy Nayor. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
We also have Dean Fronk. Very appropriate.
Hello.
Now we also have Mary Vernieu and Lindsay Graham Ahanonu.
Hello.
Welcome to the conversation. Thank you for being here. And finally, I'm going to welcome Rich Delia to the conversation as well.
Hello.
Hi, Rich.
Hello, everyone. An early happy Halloween to you all.
Thank you.
All right. So I warned you all up top. I have a bunch of group questions for you, and we're gonna test out that process with a fun one to start here, because Halloween is right around the corner and everyone out there is looking for scary movie recommendations. Can you name one horror movie that you've worked on that you're especially proud of and want everyone to put a pin in for this Halloween?
Well, this season, I would say Barbarian. So that would get my vote of latest in the theaters. Yeah.
Very cool.
I would say for myself, the It franchise, It and It Too. I think there's always room for a scary clown in Halloween. So
That's right. Oh, yeah, that clown's awesome too.
He's a scary one.
Yeah, absolutely. I do recommend House of a Thousand Corpses. That's Captain Spaulding right in the back there.
For us, I think my best friend's Exorcism, which is on Amazon.
That was my watch last night. A plus work. Elsie is something else in that movie, as she is in every movie I've seen her in. Before we get into genre specifics together, just to get to know you all a little bit up top here, there are tons of avenues one can pursue if they want to work in this industry. So can you each tell us a little bit about what it was specifically that made you say to yourself, I have to work in casting and nothing else?
That's a very interesting question. For me, I had been working as an intern at a talent agency and sort of found my way to casting I wasn't sure exactly what it was. And then my first movie I worked on was The Doors as an assistant, and I fell in love from there.
I grew up going to the theater with my parents every Friday. That's what we would do. We'd go have a movie night. I just had a passion for artists and film, and I grew up dancing and just loving every aspect of it. So I majored in film. I didn't really understand what casting was at the time. Someone sparked my interest that came to speak to us, one of our alumni. And then I interned because we had to for credit, and I just fell in love with it. And then I moved to LA and I started interning for this lady. And I fell even more in love with casting. I love the balance of creative and business. It's a nice mix, and you still get to work with artists, which I really, really enjoy.
I also began in theater, and I really thought this would be the stealth way to go in when I thought I wanted to be an actor and really hear what happens when the actors leave the room and when the actor gets discussed, but the actor never hears the feedback, or there's just no time. So I did an internship at Manhattan Theater Club with their casting department. And within the first 48 hours, I knew this was for me, and acting was sort of left behind, but it felt at first sort of second best, and then I thought it's really for me the best, and I get to be around actors all the time and work with actors, and it's just sort of the fantastic blend of everything that I loved.
I started at Breakdown Services back when they actually had you drive around and pick up scripts, and so I went from not knowing anyone here to knowing only casting directors. And so the casting really was the only avenue that I've been in so far. So
for myself, I was an actor, and I had been auditioning, and my casting director said to me, you know, have you ever thought about casting? I said no, because I hadn't. And I was always been a fan of puzzles. I love doing puzzles and I love books. And I had just read The Help. And I loved that book, and it was one of the first movies I became an assistant on. And I loved the idea that the script was like a puzzle, and all of the actors were the pieces to get to flesh out that ensemble, and being able to help bring a book that meant so much to me to life, and to bring those characters to life I was hook, line, and sinker obsessed. And so I just kind of dove in from there.
Got a puzzle brain as well. I like picturing it that way. Things will get a little easier because I have a couple of individual questions now. Dean, I'll come your way first, because I was reading that in addition to casting, you also teach audition technique. So in attempt to, you know, take two usable pieces of advice from you right now for our audience, what's a technique that's kind of remained the same since day one of you starting to work in that capacity? But then also, what's something new that's emerged as the industry has evolved?
I always say, as long as you know your lines, you know, that's the half of the battle. And so that's the thing that's, you know, not changed. And just know your material. But I also say you need to pop off the screen a little bit more. And it's making choices now that'll make you stand out. It's not like you have the opportunity to go in and take over the room and, you know, use your charm to get everyone on your side beforehand. So you really have to make distinct choices that'll set you apart.
So with that in mind, do you have any advice for anyone out there who's auditioning via tape or via a Zoom call that, you know, needs to find a way to make themselves pop in that capacity rather than being in the room physically?
Yeah, it's just overemphasizing your lines and just making choices that will stand out. That's really the thing. You know, once you get the part and you're in the room and everything, then you guys and the director are going to work on your nuances and developing that. But you need to find a way to pop off the screen to get yourself to that point.
All right, Nancy, I'll come your way now, because I know you got your start in the studio system working as a senior VP of feature casting for Universal, I believe. Yeah. What would you say, to give a little insight into that process, is the biggest difference between what the audition and the casting process is like for a studio feature versus an independent feature?
Well, at the studio, I was oftentimes overseeing a lot of the major choices and the leads that were star names coming off of star lists. So there was less auditioning. The audition process is the same when it came to that part. I think in the indie world, there's more freedom to not always go off the A-list world that kind of feeds the beast of a studio where, you know, they have to get a return on their giant investment of brick and mortar land and, you know, theme parks. And it's just a huge investment. So in the indie world, I think you have more freedom to be creative, to give people their first breaks, to break new actors. And so there is more kind of riding on the auditions. The auditions might be for the leads versus the supporting parts. When
someone wants to audition for a studio feature, but you have that kind of defined list to work with, is there any possible way for someone to break through that list and still make it into the running?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, this wasn't a Universal movie, but I remember being kind of inspired talking to someone about the process for Jerry Maguire, and that there were lead name actresses that wanted the role, but that the filmmaker, I guess it was Cameron, made a choice to go with Renee Zellweger, who was brand new at the time, because it was reflective of the story. The story was about a star agent falling in love with his secretary, and his secretary was not also a star. He was the star. So relatively, to make the casting choice of going with a newer actress kind of gave the audience a chance to fall in love the same way Tom Cruise was falling in love. So I think that was a very deliberate casting choice to go with someone newer at the time. Yeah.
Definitely paid off big time. All right, Mary, I've got one for you now. So you've worked with so many directors that I just love, love, love. I'll throw out Taika Waititi, Ryan Johnson, Emerald Fennell, just to name a few there. Of all the directors that you've had the opportunity to cast for, can you give us 2 examples of directors with 2 completely different approaches to the process, just to give everyone out there kind of a sense of how it can vary from film to film and from director to director?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the directors in general look to us to kind of frame the process for them, so that they have a sort of frame of whatever the process that, the casting process is. Whenever we work on a David O. Russell movie, for example, we'll come in with the scenes, and his interpretation of whatever the scenes are completely different than you could never predict what exactly he's going to have people do, because it's like he's got something in his mind that he has an end goal. So I think that his interpretation of the scenes can have the actors get to have so much fun, and some directors don't want to. They just want to hear it, and they don't want to necessarily give any kind of feedback, and then they want to think about it and watch it. I think it varies within the directors, but it also varies as the process goes on. So in the beginning, you're presenting them more choices, and then as you start to narrow down, the process will change accordingly.
Mm-hmm. All right, Lindsay. So I'm going to use you now to kind of push us into the horror genre a little bit. I believe 30 Days of Night was maybe one of your very first horror movies that you had ever worked on. So what did that particular film teach you about, what it means to cast for a horror movie versus any other genre of film out there?
I mean, that was one of my first movies to work on in general. It was when I was very, very new to Hollywood and casting. And it's an interesting process because we all see what we see on screen, and a lot of times it's very specific. And what I've found we haven't done a ton of horror casting, but what we have done is the audition process is not as direct. They kind of want to see like what nuance each actor brings to the screen and the audition. And it's not always what you would expect. So it was just it was fun. It was a different, every casting horror is a completely different. Every audition is so different, which is actually really exciting. Even though you're hearing the same thing, everyone has a different idea of bringing that specific scene to life, which was cool.
Could watch that specific movie over and over and over. And the same is true of the movies I'm going to ask you about, Rich, because in particular, I guess I want to focus on the first It movie, because I'm a big believer that that's probably one of the best ensembles that we've seen put together on screen, really ever. That young ensemble is something special. So when you're putting a group like that together, how much are you focusing on what an individual brings to their particular role, and how much are you looking for how they pair with one another and the chemistry between them?
Well, thank you for that. And in that particular case, it was especially important, I think, because when you're working with younger actors, so much of the time it's about their natural essence and really just letting them be who they are and figuring that out. So for that one in particular, the characters were so well defined, obviously through Stephen King's book and through Andy Muschietti's script, but the kids, 3 of the kids in that movie, it was their first film ever. So it was really just bringing kids in and creating a safe space for them to be who they are, and then kind of crafting the roles from that. So it got down to a point, we saw about 1,000 kids for it, and it got down to a point where we had like 5 choices for each one. And then it was like day camp mayhem at my office. It was just bringing in different groups of kids and figuring out who had chemistry. And eventually we noticed that there was just one group of kids that was kind of off in the corner, all hanging out with each other. We were like, it kind of happened naturally. And we were like, I think that's the group. And it just happened to work out that way.
Oh, I love that group so much. All right, I'm going to throw out my most selfish question of the bunch here, and it's for you, Nancy and Rich, because you could probably tell I love the Scream movies. So I can't be talking to two people who worked on some of those films and not ask about it. So can you each pinpoint the most challenging role of your respective Scream movie to cast?
Oh gosh. Well, I was going to say I had the real honor and pleasure of working with Wes Craven at a time where I think that was like his last Scream movie. So that was so amazing to go through the process with him. I think the challenge is always who's the killer, because, you know, you kind of have to decide that as you're going along. They know, but I think that's always the tipping point of the person that is the red herring that you trust, but later can make that turn. And that was a fascinating process because, of course, you really don't want to give it away. And so there was a lot of secrecy during the process. Like I took a camera person to Wes's house to tape an actress, and I couldn't tell him where we were going or what project we were working on. Or I mean, there was literally like I practically had to blindfold him to get him up the hill. And you know, you have to. That's the most delicate part, I think, is that. I think the others, there's a little more wiggle room, but for the final reveal, that's always the biggest challenge.
You nailed that in your particular film. That is probably one of my favorite killer reveals of all time. It's just an A+ performance right there.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it was interesting when we started. I mean, Nancy set the bar so high with the cast for the original Scream. Everyone remembers them. Everyone knows who they are. And so it was already a high bar that was set. There was so much enthusiasm and excitement amongst the actors, but we weren't able, I agree, the killers were the hardest to cast in ours because they never knew they were the killers, even when they were cast. We didn't tell them. So, and they had fake material. We didn't give the script to anyone. And the actors didn't know whether they were auditioning for a good guy, a killer, someone who dies, someone who doesn't. So we had to kind of parse through that and figure it out without telling them. So it was a very tricky thing to kind of, and a leap of faith on the actor's part to kind of go with us and trust our gut, because they would ask us questions that we just couldn't answer. And so it was just kind of throwing things into the dark, and we knew things were sticking, but I think they were walking out of the room going, what was that? I don't even know, until they got a call that they were cast. So
your gut was spot on too. You kept the bar just as high. Here's one for the full group now. How do you each pinpoint the right sides to give for a horror movie audition? Do you tend to lean towards the scary stuff, the more conversation-driven material, or does it absolutely have to be a mixture of both in order to figure out who's best for the roles?
I mean, I think it has to be both, because you have to see that they can go the full range of emotions, and you have to, of course, everything ramps up in anything that's well written. It starts conversationally, you know, it has to have a launching pad for all the chaos to ensue. And so they have to be able to play all of it, the whole spectrum.
Yeah, they always say in auditions to actors, you know, you'll go far, we can pull you back. You know, we can always pull you back, but we can't help you up. I think that's especially true in horror, because I always talk about with the directors, like, you need to see that they can believably portray this fear, this terror, this chaos, everything, because otherwise you're taking a chance if you're going, yeah, I'm sure they'll be able to do it on set. And then you're on set and it's like, I don't believe that demon is coming through their window and ripping them to shreds or whatever it is, you know, so there you go.
Oh, Mary and Lindsay, I'll throw that to you with a little more specificity. What was it like casting the role of Gretchen in my best friend's Exorcism? Because that is a mighty demanding role and a very challenging thing to convince that, you know, you can play in a single audition. So what is kind of like step one for casting a role like that?
We were very lucky to be able to do a huge search for that role. They were extremely open to casting the best actor. It was the height of the pandemic, so we had to cast this movie all on Zoom, which was an interesting challenge given the genre of the film. But we really saw hundreds of young ladies, and it was such an ensemble, which was nice. So because they were so open, we were able to just pick the best. Sorry.
Sorry, my dog just got here.
The dog just arrived.
Apologies. Sorry.
Maybe we should go to.
I'm always all for the pet involvement in these conversations. It's a big part of our lives, just like these jobs in these movies.
Sorry about that. He'll be quiet now. He's saying hello.
But anyways, we did a lot of rounds of self-tapes. We did a ton of callbacks. To speak to the question Nancy answered, we had a big combination of sides because Gretchen has such an arc within the film, and she's so vibrant and lovable, and then obviously it takes a turn, and you really needed a young actor with a lot of layers. So we actually were able to use pages from the script, which was nice in this case, and just went through a very long process with a lot of scenes.
Can I say that sometimes there's a weird thing that happens where there's like a creature that everyone's supposed to see, and there's a reaction scene with literally no dialogue, and it's always a little awkward, but it's important. So you do these sections of the audition, and now everything's virtual, which I like when there's callbacks in person. I mean, or chemistry reads in person. That feels so important not to give up that option. But in terms of the first round, it's so fun. And really sometimes there's just sort of an instruction instead of sides to just like see something horrific and respond to it and just look horrified. And it's really sometimes very comical, and sometimes it's really awesome. And it's just something that's just part of the job. And you do have to show that you can do it. So,
Dean, do you want to add anything about the sides? But then also I do need to ask, because you already brought up House of a Thousand Corpses. What is it like casting for Rob Zombie in particular?
He's awesome. That's the only thing I can really say. He's so smart. The guy's like beyond anything that you would imagine in terms of his intelligence level. But yeah, basically that movie was, Nancy, I don't know if you remember, but I'm pretty sure you oversaw us doing that movie, or at least I know signed off on me doing it. So that was, thank you for that. That was for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, Rob was awesome. And basically it was as crazy of auditions as I've ever had, period. So.
Oh, now I need a follow up. Why was that an especially crazy audition?
He had for the final callbacks, we were in the penthouse over in Sherman Oaks, and we had to notify security to tell every floor that Rob Zombie was coming in, and that he actually had two of the characters come in full makeup and to do the torture scenes. And it was pretty crazy.
That is so true, that if you don't have a soundproofed office, you have to kind of prepare everyone in your building.
Oh, yeah.
And you have these blood-curdling screams that nobody should call the police. It's so funny.
Yeah, I used to have an acupuncturist next to me at one point, and I always used to go, "Oh my God, did we tell the acupuncturist about this?" Because people would come in and be screaming, and it would have been very bad.
I'll build on that a little here. Just in general, whether it's a horror movie or really any movie for that matter, how much do you encourage actors to come to the table for a first audition with things like costumes, and how big to go with certain things, like in the horror movie case, I guess, how big to go with screams and things like that?
I would say that it's whatever they need to get there. That's sort of what we say. Like, it's like, if you feel like you need certain things in order to do your try to let them have their artistic freedom that way, and as much, because I think in the end, a lot of props and a lot of other kinds of things, you really kind of actually just need to see what the acting is. But if that's what helps get them there, then we're okay with, then it's whatever the room is yours.
All right. I have an audience question here. Anyone can jump in on this. How do you indicate to a casting director that you've had experience with body paint and prosthetics? I had a 12-hour experience, and the artist commended me for being a joy to work with. How do I share that with casting directors?
I guess through your agent or manager or whomever submitting you for something, or, it's definitely a special skill that, if they're submitting you for a horror film, saying that, I've worked with body paint, I've worked with makeup, people all the time are definitely indicating different skills that might make them specially qualified or unique for the job. And I think that would be one that you would certainly want to mention.
If you put it on, if it's through breakdown, you can put it under notes as well.
Yeah.
That,
And
that's
also,
like-
So if you have
that goes like right under your face. So
You can also state it in your slate. If the casting director is asking you to slate, a lot of people do their name, height, and then say their experience, if it's a special skill or special experience they've had.
and if it's something really cool looking, you could also zoom in on it and kind of show it, or either hold it up or, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So to touch on something that was just brought up, here's another question from the audience. And there's a lot of questions about this specific topic here. How can we get on your radar if we are doing great work, but we don't have top agents submitting us or haven't done projects that are super buzzy yet?
Well, we try to see as many people as we can for the projects that we do. So I think it's just a question of being able to have, that access to breakdown, like, and put yourself on tape, once, because if it's the part of breakdown that goes to people who don't have representatives, like we try to use that as much as we can, particularly when we're looking for something that's a new person. And I think that, eventually you'll get on people's radar. Just keep doing the work, keep doing the auditions, keep doing the work. And eventually, like, I think you grow as you do the work, and that also gets people's attention.
We also post a lot of breakdowns on our social media account, especially when we're looking for something specific. And I think that's another great way to get on different casting directors' radars if they're not using Actors Access or only using Breakdown Express. But we do, even our counterparts in other cities, we see a lot of breakdowns posted there, and you can sometimes get in that way as well.
To build on that a little, I'm sure you all have a standard process and certain resources that you turn to, but the whole idea of you never know who's watching does feel like it's very true. So can you each share maybe, I guess, the most unusual or unexpected place that you found an actor for a role, something that surprised you?
I always personally find it fascinating when you find actors from open calls, because oftentimes they're not even actors necessarily. They've just like seen a poster, seen a flyer and said, oh, I kind of want to come check this out. And there's something really special and unique and magical about someone who doesn't have any bad habits, but just has a great energy or a sense or that might be right for a specific role. And if you can figure out a way to kind of make that work, it's very exciting. So, I think open calls depending on the size and scope of the role, we do them quite frequently. And I think that they can always turn up surprising and amazing results.
Agreed.
Yeah, we were doing a film for Netflix that Jennifer Lopez was starring in called The Mother, and we had to find her daughter during the pandemic. And we were reaching out to high schools in Puerto Rico, and we had people self-taping in Spain and Portugal and, everywhere. And we did send out flyers to schools saying it's an open call and basically a virtual open call, just self-tape and send it to this link and, upload it. And so it is exciting, especially the virtual world, to be able to discover people that way. And especially young kids, I did several projects the last couple of years, 9-year-olds, 7-year-olds. We did Ivy and Bean for Netflix, and one of our kids was 7 and had never worked before, and she got the lead. And it was a series of 3 movies back to back that they shot. So it's like there's really a possibility of discovery all the time. And I think we do try to offer that opportunity as best we can. So
it's fun for us when we discover people. I mean, that's when you find somebody and they're the thing, you're like, wow, like it just is so like, it's beautiful for them, but it's also great. It's beautiful for us too, because we get to watch that journey. I mean, they get to have a dream that they didn't even maybe know they had.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
it's actually really fun when their agent includes you in the call when they call them to tell them the part. It's the best. It's really, I mean, that they're getting the call, but when you can actually be listening to, it's really very sweet to hear the excitement.
I'll put some of you on the spot for specifics now. Nancy, you already gave us one, but does anyone else have an example of like someone that was discovered through a process like that, I don't know, you're just especially proud of, and they're on to doing big things now, and it just kind of, fills your heart and makes you happy that you're the one that found them?
While they're thinking, can I add one more? I'm just going to say, because Tessa Thompson, she was like one of the opening cameo kills in When a Stranger Calls. And she was on her way with Katie Cassidy to visit Camilla Bell, who was babysitting. And that was her first job ever. So I'm excited. I'm proud of her every time I see her on a billboard or a cover of a magazine. I'm thrilled. There's more, but I love that one recently.
I can't believe that's never clicked in my mind until you just brought it up. That is her.
Mm-hmm.
That's something else.
We did a film a long, long time ago that Lori Petty directed, and she cast Jennifer Lawrence in The Room. It was her first indie. And then she obviously went on to the Hunger Game franchise and
Winter's Bone. It was before Winter's Bone.
It was before that.
She was like 16 living in Kentucky. Like it was like this, we just got to meet her, and it was Lori Petty's real story of her life, which was, it was pretty dark and messed up, and Jennifer really just came into it, and we're just like, who is this girl?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From Kentucky. That was a good.
I'm obsessed with my little, my Sanaya Sidney and Demi Singleton, who played Venus and Serena Williams and King Richard. They had worked before, but we did a massive search for those roles, and they certainly didn't play tennis and grew into those roles. We started shooting right before COVID, so we had to shut down and then come back 6 months later. And we were all, as everyone on this call will know, all the casting directors, when you have kids and you shut down for 6 months, you're freaking out because if they grow, if they change, what will happen? And instead, they proved that we did cast the right people for the roles, because when they came back, they did play tennis and they had actually become tennis players and took the time during the pandemic to even align themselves closer with the girls. And so I'm very proud of them.
They were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And
How about for you, Dean? Anyone in particular that comes to mind?
That's the fun of being in indies, is we've Taft-Hartley'd so many people. I have a fun one. We had $1 million movie that a lady put $1 million together to make a movie about her dog that had 3 legs. And we were casting kids up in northern Cleveland. And I had a young man named Josh Hutcherson who had drove from Newport, Kentucky, all the way up there. And he ended up being the lead in it. And then I would say maybe within a year, he had a team over at ICM. So he was a good young man.
Clearly, horror is the dominant set dressing behind me, but I feel like you guys kind of zoomed in on the Hunger Games book on the shelf as well. we're capturing all the right things today. I have an audience question here about making reels. Would you recommend an actor make one reel with a variety of genres in it, or is it a good idea to have a horror-specific reel if you're going after a role in that genre?
I think it's good to be adaptable, personally. So if you have one reel that's everything, if you can pull clips out of it or something, if you're auditioning for a comedy or auditioning for a horror or a period piece, you might want to send different material that's a little bit more in line with what you're auditioning for. So I do think that, if it's possible, kind of tailoring it to what you're submitting for might pay dividends for you over the long run. That would be my personal thought.
Mm-hmm. I think on Breakdown, they allow you to separate out like comedy reel, drama reel. And that's helpful because if I am casting a drama, I don't need to go through like sort of back and forth between comedy and drama. I just want to focus on one or the other, pick a lane. So it's nice to be able to post both separately.
It makes it so much easier to be able to do that. Not like the old VHS days where we'd have to fast forward through everything.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, here's an audience question that caught my eye because it kind of saddens me a little that we still discuss this to this day. But in your opinions, does the industry in general look down upon actors who work in horror films? Has horror work negatively affected well-known actors who ventured into it, perhaps as a result of imagining that their career is spiraling down outside of the horror genre?
I don't think so anymore. I mean, I think there might have been a time when people like looked negatively at that for maybe a moment, but I think horror is hard to do and hard to do it well. And with, the popularity of movies like Scream and, that so many movies, like I think people it used to be that TV was like people look down on that, and now look at the content. I mean, I think now it's changed. I don't think it affects negative.
Just need to look at all the stars who have started off in horror films. And I mean, you can go all the way back to the 70s and even probably further than that, but I'm saying the ones that I know. So, but yeah, everybody is like, every movie you can probably find a star that, got big from and started in a horror movie.
There's also so many interesting directors working in the genre right now, too, that I think that there's a lot of new voices that have kind of come to the table. And so, those directors will go on to do all different kinds of films. So becoming, having them become aware of your work or a fan of your work can, again, only pay dividends down the road.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that someone like Darren Aronofsky would do a movie like Black Swan, and that was sort of like, that was a departure for him, and I think a departure for everyone in the movie, and it was quite a success just because it was a great movie regardless.
Yeah.
Even when Jessica Chastain did Mama, that wasn't my movie, but it nearly gave me a heart attack when I watched it. That was, and I'm pretty hardcore, it takes a lot to scare me. That thing really scared the hell out of me. But I was like, wow, Jessica Chastain and Nikolai Waldau doing, sort of very traditional horror. And I think more and more actors, as you said, they're attracted to it, and the grosses are telling. The grosses are huge, so it's being validated that it's a very worthwhile genre to be a part of.
You can't say that, Nancy, and then not have me follow up. What's the scariest horror movie you've ever seen?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm gonna just say, when I was a kid, I was such a geek of the Dark Shadows and Night Gallery and Outer Limits and Twilight Zone. So my first horror film was The Exorcist, and I'll have to go with that because at the time, I mean, now the effects look a little cheesy, but it's just such a classic. So I would say that scared the hell out of me and probably made me the genre geek that I am.
Anyone else want to throw one out there?
Rosemary's Baby. It's just it scares me.
I completely agree with Nancy about The Exorcist, though. I still have a cross above my bed.
I have a tie for mine. The two scariest movies to me are Jaws and Silence of the Lambs. I can't even go in a pool alone to this day because I think a shark is going to come out of the wall when I hear that music in my head. I don't know what they did in that movie, but it's wild.
Yeah.
Lindsay, you're not getting out of this. What's your pick?
I have to agree with Nancy as well. I saw that film when I was shouldn't have.
Popular answer for a reason. It still plays just as well to this day. I love it. For all of you now, are there any acting techniques that are specific to horror movies that some out there might be overlooking, but you think are essential to keep in your back pocket for when you jump into a horror movie?
Well, personally, I think specific to the horror genre, maybe more than other genres, I think the onus is really on the actor to create the world that we're seeing, because so many times when they're auditioning, like what Nancy was saying before, when you're choreographing bits, one of the best auditions I've ever been a part of was when Thaisa Farmiga came in for The Nun, because we had her do a huge scene that was essentially wordless. And so we choreographed it beforehand. I'm like, now when I bang the table, there's going to be a cross flying at your head, and then the window's going to break. And she kind of processed everything, and we turned the sound off on the camera and just taped her going through it. And you could see everything happening through her performance. So I really think the idea that you create the whole sense of scene through the audience experiences it through the protagonist and what they are feeling and what they are seeing. And I think can be a little specific sometimes to horror, or at least is heightened in that genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was also going to say it is not a moment to be shy or hold back, which came up before. Like when we did Exorcism of Emily Rose, we padded the walls of the office because people had to be possessed by the devil, speaking in tongues, eating bugs off the floor, having epileptic seizures. Like the people that were in just even a smidge holding back, like I think you said, Rich, you can always dial it down, but like there is an opportunity, if ever, to go for it. And I think it's hard because actors don't always have the benefit of knowing, well, how big is too big? You can't always know, but you can always say afterwards, do you want me to do it differently? Do you have an adjustment? I will happily adjust, dial it up, dial it down. but still, this is a world where you just have to go for it. It's not a subtle place to live in, you got to go for it.
So we've already covered a whole bunch of horror audition do's, and I mean, I guess this could be reversed and still applied, but can each of you give us a horror movie audition don't, or maybe something that you see frequently in these types of auditions that maybe you wish folks out there wouldn't lean on as much?
Don't bring a violent weapon. Don't bring a machete or a knife to an audition.
Or gun, yeah.
Or gun, leave
toy
those
gun
alone.
or whatever,
Yeah.
even toy gun. Also, if there's a monster in a scene, don't have an argument with the other character in a loud voice, because the monster will hear you and find you and eat you. So it's like kind of shocking how people don't understand the whole context of the scenes. I mean, sometimes they don't have the whole script, but oftentimes you're like, you have the script and clearly there's a monster outside the door. So maybe, lower the volume of your argument. I don't know.
Dean, you got one for us?
Oh, back in the day, when I used to read with everybody, when we did Children of the Corn 4, and I had, at the end of the day, I looked at my arm, and my arm was actually had like fingerprints up and down it, just from guys squeezing my arm over and over. That's one of those "thou shalt not touch the casting director" moments. So.
Mary and Lindsay, anything come to mind?
We've had some walls broken in our office. Maybe we should pad our off. That's a good plan, Nancy.
Yeah, we've got some holes.
Holes punched through the walls.
Yeah, I think there's that thing too. It's like where you just sort of like somehow as the actor let us know that like, okay, I'm in character. Like, because if you expect, particularly if you don't know people and they come in and then you're like, what room am I in with what person? Oh no. Like, I mean, I've definitely been in rooms where I've been a little nervous, like casting out of hotels in New York. Like I could maybe not make it out.
I feel like that's a great horror movie idea.
Right?
Like casting a horror movie and it becomes a horror movie. Rich, here's one for you that kind of falls into what we're talking about a little bit. Did Bill Skarsgård show up in a clown costume for his It audition? Just curious.
Bill did not show up in a clown costume, although we had many actors who did show up in a clown costume. But one of the things that Bill did that is incredible and actually made it to the film, it was one of the scariest auditions I've ever been in, given especially the fact that he was not in costume. He was just Bill, and he's a lovely guy. But there's a thing that he does as Pennywise where he kind of twitches one eye and one of his eyeballs like stays and the other one's twitching. Bill actually did that that's just something that he can do. And so he did that, and it was horrifying. And then Andy was like, we're casting you and we're keeping that for the character. But they put Bill through his paces, and at some point he did have to get in a clown costume, but it wasn't the original audition.
Can't help but notice we have another guest, and that guest is adorable.
Sorry, we're either muted or Deco's up here with us.
Makes it even better. I love it.
On the Zoom, he said.
Here's another question from our audience. Are actors in upper age ranges well represented in the horror scripts you're seeing now?
I'd say yes. There's always the crazy aunt or uncle or farmer, anything like that. There's definitely lots of old parts, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's always the crazy old lady who lives down the street, and they're sort of, a red herring, right? Like there's always that person who you think is, and then it turns out they're just not. They're just
Never trust the grandma.
Yeah, no. And I love now with visual effects how they can like crawl on the ceiling like a bug. It's like they're like, you didn't see that from the 90-year-old woman. Yeah, exactly.
To add to that a little bit, can you each pinpoint like a new horror genre acting opportunity that's popped up recently that you're seeing more and more of in what you're casting? Like, I don't know, a new kind of character, a certain type of representation we're seeing in these stories, something like that.
I don't know if it's new, but I'm fascinated by creature performers, which, we've cast a bunch of them, and people that really can have a lot of dexterity and can, we've gone into circus performers and things like that, and people that can really unhinge their limbs and move things. And I mean, I think it's fascinating to watch. And I mean, it's amazing. When you can see that translated on screen and it's actually become something that's scary, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Rich, that's when you say this is a really fun job, is when you have auditions like that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing just to see. I'm a fan of anyone that can do something unusual and unique. And so to see people kind of bringing that, I feel lucky to be able to just be up close and kind of watching and sharing that with them.
Makes me think of the incredible Javier Botet in Mama.
He's amazing. I mean, he's fantastic. And yeah, he's the best.
Yeah. This isn't really a character, but just the subgenre of genre comedy is fun, because that's also a fine line of, being in a weird way grounded in making the horrific like real and grounded, but also bringing in the comedy side to it, which is a lot of fun. So I think that kind of expands the genre in a really good way.
Opening this one up to anything that comes to mind, even beyond the horror genre, can you each give an example of a time that an actor came in for a role, didn't give you what you envisioned for that particular character, but what they did inspired you and you opted to pivot, they scored the role, and it turned out better off for it?
I think that's sort of what is really inspiring about our job. I'm trying to think of a specific.
Yeah. Like somebody comes in, it's just not how you saw it, but you're like, wow. And it just becomes like, you're just like, then you cannot see it any other way.
I have an example. Alexander Ludwig in Bad Boys.
Yeah.
We did the last Bad Boys franchise, and the character that Alexander Ludwig ended up playing, they sort of changed the trajectory of what it was supposed to be, and we had already agreed to see him, so we went through with the audition, and then we continued with what the character was supposed to be, and he still got it. So that was really, little things like that happen a lot, which is fun. It was supposed to be a diverse actor, maybe a little older. It just completely sort of switched, and he was the first audition and he booked it
because he was so memorable. You couldn't see it any other way after that, which is nice.
Anyone else think of an example?
Rosie Perez for us in Birds of Prey, that character was written much younger on the page, and she is such a force and so amazing. And so when we kind of, the director Kathy Yan is amazing. We were kind of chatting about it, and when Rosie's name came up, it was like, let's see if she's interested. And it was such a different way to go for the role, but she was like, yeah, I'll be a superhero. I love this. And so she really wanted to engage, and that was very exciting for all of us because there was so much diversity in that cast. And so to add a bit of age diversity too, we thought was very cool for the genre.
One of my favorite movies of 2020 right there.
It's a fun one.
If no one else has another example, we've got some more audience questions. Here's one that takes us back into horror. Do you really have to learn how to scream in order to work on a horror film? And I guess I'll add to that. Do you have any kind of tips or tricks for doing a realistic, believable horror movie scream?
We always joke that sometimes there are people that scream a certain way and you just want them to die. You're like, I can't hear that scream. That scream, I don't root for them to survive. It's just some people have a scream that is like nails on a blackboard and it's just not conducive. And I don't think you can learn it. I think it just if I tried it, I'd be a disaster at it. Some people have vocal cords and it comes out in a really cool way, and others is just like a frog. It doesn't work. And so, I think, I don't know if it's something you can learn, but it is essential, and sometimes you just can't take it personally. Either it works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any tips or tricks they want to add? All right. Here's a question inspired by the fine folks at SAG. What advice do you have for actors about the way that they present themselves on social media nowadays? Is that something that actually comes into play at any point in the casting process?
I mean, I think people definitely look at people's social media, now, producers will say, do you have anybody with a lot of followers? And, and I think, it's not like we go to people's social medias to look and try to find something wrong, but I do think that as an actor, you should be mindful about what you're posting. and how you look and what you're, just what you're putting out there as it's because it's basically a public persona. So I think it's tricky. Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to the social media conversation? All right. So, Rich, I'll throw this one your way to kind of build on that a little bit, because especially because you just had Black Adam come out, you've got more DC films in the future, and really anybody who's ever worked on a franchise or an adaptation for that matter can chime in on this. But when you're casting roles like that, how much are you paying attention to either folks who campaign for the roles on social media, or maybe the fan enthusiasm for a specific actor to get cast in a particular role they love?
Well, I always welcome enthusiasm wherever it comes from any corner, because people love, people that want to sign up and be part of it. But I try as hard as possible to focus on what actors are doing in the room with the given material, and not so much what other external outside forces are saying that they should be. Because, one of the people I'm really, really proud of that we were able to cast in Black Adam is Quintessa Swindell as Cyclone, and they are the first non-binary, trans superhero of that form, and they are amazing, and they really hadn't done much, and they read opposite a lot of well-known people, but they came in and it was an example of, I have this role for the next 10 minutes and I'm going to do exactly what I want with it. And it was mind-blowing for me as an audition, and I think for everyone who saw it, because they really put their stamp on the role. And to Mary's point and Lindsay's point, what they were saying before about Alexander, it's like when you see it and it's just really good, it's impossible to unsee it. And so then everyone else that kind of came in after that, it was like they're doing a version of what they think we want to see, whereas Quintessa did the role the way they see it, and that's the version we want to sign up for. And I don't think the fan cast would have necessarily mentioned them as an option, because they didn't really know who they were. So
it's an excellent example. Anyone else want to chime in on that, especially when it comes to adapting books to film too? I mean, I know with my best friend's Exorcism, I love Grady's work.
I mean, we didn't really get a lot of, it was such a strange time when we were casting that film, and it was, I think, slightly under the radar at the time. And so many films right now, I don't know if you experience this, Rich, with the Black Adam and everything, they, when we're actually in the process of it, a lot of people don't know because you're using a code name and you're not using real material, and everything is so under wraps that a lot of times the fans are not even aware things are happening. So I think a lot of those opinions come after we've already gone through a process.
Yeah, nothing against the fans, but sometimes with these projects, to Lindsay's point and to Mary's point, you're trying to almost contain the information because you don't want it to get out. So you're trying to, fake names, fake sides, fake code names and all of that stuff. So they're aware sometimes and kind of are chiming in after the process is already in an advanced stage.
Right.
One thing that I notice is a sort of social media discussion now is sort of authenticity and inclusion. And, is this actor going to act the role of something they aren't? If it's a different diversity or a different nationality or different, whatever it is, a physical challenge, like if you need a star name and you need a certain physically challenged person, then, and if there is not a star that has that, can they play that? So that's something that I find everybody has an opinion on, and there can be a lot of vocal kind of social media discussion. And I guess ultimately, some movies might not get made because of that. And they have been shelved because there was never quite that Venn diagram of the right person who meant enough to finance the budget of a project that fit all the actual authentic qualifications of how the character was written. So that's something that's sort of an ongoing discussion that we're always looking at, I think, in the process.
Dean, you want to jump in on that before we bring up another audience question?
No, go on to the next one.
All right, here's one that everyone can hopefully give an example from the audience. What's an example of it? We've already discussed some of this a little bit, but can you each give an example of an actor taking a bold risk in a dramatic horror self-tape that got that actor a callback or booking?
I can't think of like a specific actor and what they did, but I just always know, when you're watching self-tapes, you watch, and suddenly somebody does something, whatever it is that like that just sort of gets your attention. It is, I think what we were talking about originally is like taking risks and I think but you also have to do it from a place that still feels grounded and real. So it's like, there's like a balance there, I think, between, you can't just be like a crazy person on a self-tape, because then that's not going to get you the job either. But like, I think it's like, I feel like actors, when they're really meant to play a role, they just feel it in a certain way. And you, as the person watching the tape, can also feel it.
Anything come to mind for anyone else?
Little McKenna Grace for the last Annabelle. She's an incredible young, preternaturally mature young performer, and she loves the genre. She loves horror. And when she came in, it wasn't a self-tape, but she met the director, and we were all like, okay, especially with younger actors in the genre, you're a little like, do they know what's going on? How much can we tell them about what's going on? Or have their parents talk to them? And she said, oh, I love this genre and I love Annabelle, and I made you guys some drawings. And she pulled out horrific drawings of people being mutilated and killed, and they were wonderful. She has a lot of artistic talent, but she just said, here you go, and very cheerfully. And it was, I think we knew, like, this girl's going to be okay with the material. Like, she got it.
She's so great.
She's awesome. I love her.
I'm definitely bringing that up the next time I talk to her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's so
genre fan.
Dean, Nancy, you got anything for us?
Well,
just people dying on screen and making the best blood curdling scream, things like that. All of a sudden your head just snaps.
yeah. And being at home now, doing the self-tapes, they can do a lot of bells and whistles that they would like pull out squibs and have blood coming out of their mouths, things that they couldn't necessarily do in the room successfully before. So I think this sort of new virtual world lends itself to a little more creativity. But like Rich was saying, Bill Skarsgård came in and was just himself. Like, sometimes people do all these bells and whistles and it doesn't necessarily get them the role. Sometimes it's literally just the pure artist doing it, creating the world without bells and whistles that has the most power. So yeah.
Here's
the essence that they bring.
Here's a self-tape question with a very specific thing involved. For self-tapes, when we've been given scenes where there's hardly any dialogue, but mostly action. For instance, I had one where the character is running and then struggling and then is shot, and then the rest of the scene takes place on the ground. How should we do that?
Who picked that audition scene for them? I'm sorry.
Well, now people can go out with their friends and kind of go running through the woods, which is, people have done that, and it's cool. Like, if that's the scene, it's kind of hard to just keep running in place. But yeah, I mean, if they can, they should just go for it,
All right. So somewhat similarly, and this kind of leans into what you said about Thaisa, Rich. Here's another question from the audience. When doing a self-tape and you have to either react to a dead body or a vampire coming towards you, etc., I'd love advice or hints how to show that without jumping all around in the scene. Thank you.
Well, I was going to say that a lot of times it's just the close-up and it's not about jumping around at all. And even if the stage direction say the person's like freaking out and jumping up and down or whatever physical requirements, so often I think just show it in a close-up, because yeah, you'll get the choreography later if you get the job and you're on the set. It's not always about kind of jumping through hoops or twisting yourself into a pretzel to get it. Sometimes it's literally what's happening in your face and in your eyes.
Right.
That's a really good point, Nancy, because I think at the end of the day, what people respond to, audiences and directors and casting directors, is character. And, someone discovering a dead body that's, a horrific thing. And it doesn't matter what genre that's in, acting that moment, showing that moment, feeling that moment is something that's going to translate. And someone watching that is going to feel if it's authentic or not, if depending on how the performer portrays it.
All right. We have so many audience questions. Here's another good one. If we particularly love horror movies, are there any muscles we can start to flex to pave our way into the genre, or particularly to stand out when you're seen for auditions in the genre?
Guess get working on that scream.
Yeah.
The vocal cords.
And watch them, have a good knowledge of the classics and,
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at it, like, again, to character, a couple people said The Exorcist is one of their favorite movies. Watch Ellen Burstyn's performance in The Exorcist. That performance, it's like, it could be in any movie. It doesn't matter. She's brilliant. So watch the great performances in horror movies. Turn on Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs and Anthony Hopkins and see what they're doing and why it's translating and why it's making you feel like your skin is crawling. Or even better, why someone like with Anthony Hopkins, why you're feeling conflicted because you like this character.
Mhm.
How does that play? What choices did he make that makes you like a mass murdering serial killer?
And that you want him to go eat the psychiatrist.
Yes.
Excited about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, key into those moments and see what they're doing and how they're affecting that.
That's making me think a little. Can each of you pick someone that like you think is pitch perfect casting for a horror role, something that you were not involved in, but you look at that and you're like, damn, like I wish I thought of that first kind of thing?
I don't know the name of this actor because it was so long ago, but there's this movie called Burnt Offerings that was like literally from the 70s, which is a really long, and the actor who played the limo driver was so scary and had the best face. It still has not like left. I'll have to look up who it is because he wasn't anybody that anyone knew, but it just stuck with, his face and his presence. I'll have to look it up though.
Gives me good homework. There's a movie I have not seen. I like that.
I don't know if it holds up, but I remember
I'll take it anyway.
being terrified.
I did not do Hereditary, but I think that Toni Collette is incredible in that movie. I mean, just unbelievable.
It's an excellent choice. Dean, Nancy, what you got for us?
Well, I was going to say Bill Skarsgård in It because I do think that was genius and, he's so good. And he really brought it to life. I can't imagine anyone else in the role. So, yeah.
Oh, go old school Michael Berryman from Hills Have Eyes. Can't forget his face. That's for sure.
Solid picks all around there. One other thing that came up a couple of times from the audience, I'm not sure if any of you have actually worked on any of this type of casting, but is there any suggestions you would give to an actor who's auditioning for a Screen Life movie where they need to be acting for the screen, actually?
I'm not sure what that is. What does that mean?
Oh, it's like I'm trying to think of a good example, like the movie Host, where I mean, I'm just specifically referencing horror movies now, but where the movie takes place as though it was like on your screen, like that entire movie takes place over the course of a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Or like
Unfriended.
Unfriended.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's actually easier to audition for, I think, because you've got the built-in structure.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair enough.
Well, I was going to say that like sometimes people are out of town and they're literally like on their phones doing their audition on their phones, and it's okay because like it is what it is. Again, if the person's brilliant and they're meant to get the role, they'll get the role even on their phone,
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What were you going to show, Mary?
I was going to show you guys the guy's face from Burnt Offerings.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that goes creepy.
Wow.
And I didn't even know this, but Betty Davis is in that movie. No wonder it stuck with me. Burgess Meredith and Karen Black.
Wow.
I'm definitely going to be watching that.
That's really scary.
So we have to wrap soon. I'll wrap up with these two questions. So when you're all casting, you're obviously looking for the actor who could bring the role to screen in the absolute best way possible. But what are you looking for in a potential person that you're going to cast during the audition process that signals to you they're not just going to be good in this role, but they're also going to be a good collaborator for the team that they're about to join?
Sometimes you can see if someone's a good listener, because a director, well, back when there was in the room, they would say, oh, welcome, put your, purse over there. And they'd put their, please have a seat. And they would say, I want to stand. I mean, it's weird, but it kind of signaled this, like, I'm not really listening and the director wants something. It's subtle, but it would literally be in the difference of how they walked in the room and where they put their purse or, whatever, their jacket. You can tell a lot. And I think also bad behavior, it doesn't go unnoticed. So I think our job is sometimes to check and be sure everybody plays well with others. And if there's a rumor out there, it's not like bad behavior gets swept under the rug anymore. There's too many people taping it, listening to it, posting about it. So it's not like you can have a bad attitude and it doesn't leak out.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. Like, if you it is about listening in the room, and I feel like you can feel people when they come into audition. You can tell when someone's in a room if they play well without, you can tell energetically that their energy is good and they're open and enthusiastic and they want to do whatever it takes, and they're not going to make it difficult,
And also, if they're lucky enough to get an adjustment, they should actually do it, because sometimes people are so locked into how they've rehearsed that they get the benefit of a director's request for an adjustment and they do it exactly the same way twice. And that's just a bad signal for what it would be like to work with them on the day.
Rich, Dean, anything you'd like to add?
I think exactly what Mary's point about energy. It's so much about, you can sense, and even on a Zoom, you can get a sense. It's harder than in the room, but you can get a sense of someone's energy. Are they happy to be there? Are they prepared? Are they excited about the choices? And it's an energy that you want on set, rather than having someone who's going to become a thorn in people's side. You want someone that's going to be a team player and excited to be there, and film is such a collaborative medium. You just want to make sure everyone's pitching in.
So I'm going to try to squeeze in maybe one more audience question here, because this is an interesting one. And we were touching on it a little earlier, but do any of you tend to cast dancers for movement villains or evil entities?
I've cast dancers in motion capture video games also. So it's definitely a form that stands out.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's a resource for sure. When you're looking for things, it's definitely a resource, because those people do know how to do movement. But I think they also, it's a combination of being able to move and also to act. You're going to have to find both of those things together.
Yeah. And as Rich was describing, there are people who are contortionists that really do stuff that is so unnatural. So a lot of ballet dancers are always wanting to look beautiful and pretty and have have a very elegant grace. And that's not always what's required by a character in a horror film. They need to sort of look, have an uglier, scarier presence. And that's oftentimes contortionists.
All right. My last question is terrible, because I'm basically going to ask you all to pick your favorite child right now. You all have a whole lot to be proud of, but is there any particular character that is like your number one baby, that when you look back, you're like, that felt so right, and I will never not be happy that actor and character pairing came together?
You can't do that to us.
Yeah. I'm like, I have no favorites now.
No.
I have a lot I love, but no favorites.
No one wants to do it.
No.
In that case, to close us out here, to continue to give our viewership right now more things to watch, especially during Halloween time, what is the latest thing that you have coming out in the horror genre that you want to make sure everyone kind of writes down and puts on their must-watch list for the Halloween season?
I don't know if this is considered horror as much as it is, but we have a movie called Violent Night coming out with David Harbour, where he's playing Santa Claus.
That counts. David Harbour is excellent. I had the pleasure of seeing that at Comic-Con. Job well done.
It was a fun one.
That was a fun one.
I think I have anything for this Thanksgiving, but I do have The Mother coming out with Jennifer Lopez later for Netflix, which is a good action thriller, I think. So, yeah.
I have. It's not coming out just yet, but it's coming out. The next one that's coming out is the adaptation of Salem's Lot, Stephen King's Salem's Lot, and I'm really proud of the cast on that one. It's a really good. Yeah, I think it's going to be really good.
That's my favorite of the Stephen King books. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a good one, and Gary Dauberman did an amazing job with the script, so I'm very excited for it.
Yet another one that's sitting over my shoulder in a Stephen King compilation.
Yep.
How about for you, Dean? Anything you want to direct the viewers towards?
Oh, it's all the Christmas movies that are coming up here. We don't have any horror films that are right now. Now we're actually casting one, but all the Christmas movies are what we can focus on next.
We need you to make a Christmas horror movie. We need more holiday horror in general, year round. I am going to thank you all so much for your time today. And I also, on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, have to thank you for your time and also for sharing your experiences, your process, and your craft with your fellow performers. Huge congratulations on everything you have achieved, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.